It wasn't the first time she said it, but it was the first time I really heard it. Her name is Julia. We've been married for 6 years, together for almost 10. I met her when I was still finding my footing in life, working a job I didn't love, figuring out who I was supposed to be. She was confident, ambitious, quick-witted, the kind of woman who walked into a room and everyone noticed. I used to admire that about her. But admiration has a way of turning into something else when it's wielded like a weapon. The night she said it, we were in the middle of a small argument. Something stupid. I can't even remember what started it, dishes left in the sink, maybe, or me forgetting to grab something at the store. She rolled her eyes, laughed under her breath, and said, "God, you'd be nothing without me." Then she walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the words echoing in my head. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe it was just heat of the moment exaggeration. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't the first time she'd hinted at it. Little remarks here and there. No one else would put up with you. You'd fall apart without me keeping things together. Let's be honest, I make this relationship work. I used to laugh them off. Tell myself it was just her sense of humor. But standing in that kitchen, hearing her say you'd be nothing without me, I realized something I hadn't before. She believed it. And worse, she needed me to believe it too. That night, I lay awake beside her. She slept soundly as if nothing had happened. But my mind kept circling the same thought. What if she was wrong? What if I wasn't nothing without her? What if I was more? The idea didn't come with anger. It came with clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't try to convince her she was wrong. I simply made a decision. I would let her keep believing it. I'd let her live in the certainty that I was dependent, trapped, incapable of standing on my own. And while she held on to that arrogance, I would quietly build something she never saw coming. The first step wasn't to leave. It was to change. I started small, waking up earlier, taking care of things before she even noticed. Fixing what needed fixing without announcing it. Slowly getting into shape, hitting the gym consistently, cooking meals for myself instead of relying on her. She barely noticed. If she did, she brushed it off. But I noticed. And with every small improvement, the words "you'd be nothing without me" grew weaker in my head. I also started investing in myself. Not just money, but time. I picked up books I'd been meaning to read, enrolled in an evening class to develop a new skill, even reconnected with old friends she'd made me drift away from. When Julia asked where I was going or what I was doing, I kept my answers vague. Just busy. Just working on something. She didn't push too hard. Why would she? In her mind, I wasn't capable of outgrowing her. And that arrogance was exactly what gave me the space I needed. But here's the thing about slow changes. They add up. And while Julia still thought she held all the power, I was quietly stacking bricks, building a foundation she couldn't knock down. I didn't know yet exactly when or how I would use it. But I knew one thing for certain. The day would come when she realized I wasn't nothing without her. I was better. And when that day came, she'd finally understand the cost of her words. The more I worked on myself, the less I felt the weight of her words. But Julia didn't see it. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She still tossed little remarks around like casual truths. "You're lucky I manage everything. Without me, you'd be lost. You know you wouldn't last a month on your own." Each one used to sting. Now I let them roll off me. Not because they didn't matter, but because I knew something she didn't. She wasn't talking about me anymore. She was talking about the version of me that no longer existed. I started staying later at work. Sometimes actually working, sometimes just using the time to plan, to prepare, to take the steps she never thought I would. I found ways to move money into an account she didn't know about. Small amounts at first, then bigger transfers. Nothing that would set off alarms, just enough to build my own cushion. I got my own credit card, my own P.O. box, even started keeping a separate phone. Piece by piece, I was creating a life that existed completely outside of her. And she had no idea. At home, I let her keep believing she was in control. If she wanted to complain, I let her. If she wanted to lecture, I nodded. If she wanted to tell me how lucky I was to have her, I smiled faintly and said, "You're right." Because words mean nothing when the actions underneath them are shifting the ground. And Julia was standing on ground that was already cracking beneath her feet. But here's the irony. The more distant I became, the more confident she grew. One night, she came home tipsy from drinks with friends. She kicked off her heels, flopped onto the couch, and laughed. They asked me how I put up with you, she said, her words slurred with wine. I told them, please, he'd be nothing without me. I basically made him who he is. She laughed harder, pouring herself another glass. And you know what? They agreed. They said you're so lucky to have me. I sat across from her, calm, silent, watching her sip her wine. She had no idea that every word she said only made my resolve sharper. Meanwhile, I was changing in ways she couldn't ignore forever. I was stronger now, both physically and mentally. I carried myself differently, walked with purpose, spoke less, listened more. My circle of friends was expanding again. People she hadn't seen in years were back in my life. Even at work, colleagues started noticing. Promotions, opportunities, things that once passed me by started landing at my feet. Julia noticed just enough to make her nervous. Why are you out so late lately? She asked one evening. Work, I answered simply. Since when are you so secretive? Since always, I said calmly, smiling faintly. The lack of detail unsettled her, but not enough to make her see the truth. Because in her mind, I still wasn't capable of leaving. The truth is, Julia was right about one thing. She did help build the man I had become, but not in the way she thought. Her words, her arrogance, her belief that I was nothing without her. That was the fuel. The thing that pushed me to grow stronger, sharper, more independent. And one day soon, she was going to find out exactly what she had built. Not a dependent man, not a broken man, but a man who didn't need her anymore. By winter, the air between us had changed. Julia still carried herself like she was untouchable, but cracks were beginning to show. She noticed my phone buzzing more often. She noticed I didn't rush to answer her texts. She noticed I was out more, later nights, early mornings, weekends where I suddenly had plans. Where do you go all the time? She asked one night as I buttoned a shirt she hadn't seen before. Out, I said simply. With who? Friends. She frowned. Since when do you have time for friends? I met her eyes calmly. Since now. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and muttered, You'll burn out without me keeping you together. But this time, her voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Doubt. The more she sensed me pulling away, the more she tried to reassert control. She'd plan dinners, invite friends over, suggest vacations. She'd make comments like, see, we're good, we're solid. But underneath, I could see the cracks. The nervous glances when I didn't answer immediately. The way her smile faltered when I brushed past her attempts at intimacy. The edge in her voice when she reminded me, don't forget, you'd be nowhere without me. She was clinging harder, not because she believed it more, but because she was afraid I was proving her wrong. Meanwhile, my preparations were complete. The separate apartment was furnished. My accounts were mine alone. The paperwork, the essentials, the personal things I wanted all already moved. If someone walked through our house, it looked the same. But I knew better. It was already hollow, because I'd already taken me out of it. The final step was the letter. I drafted it late one night while Julia slept soundly beside me. Her breathing was steady, her face calm, as if she truly believed she still owned me. The words came easily. Julia, you always told me I was nothing without you, that no one else would put up with me, that I couldn't survive without your control. You were wrong. Every word you said pushed me further, made me stronger, proved to me that I didn't need you. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't look for me. Don't call. Because the silence you mocked is now the answer you'll have to live with. I folded the letter neatly, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it away. Waiting. Over the next few weeks, Julia grew more certain again. She mistook my calm for contentment, my silence for peace. She started posting pictures of us online again, bragging to friends about how solid we were. One evening, she curled up beside me on the couch, resting her head against my shoulder. I know I say things sometimes, she whispered, but you know you'd be lost without me. I kissed the top of her head, calm, steady. Of course, I said. And she smiled, satisfied, completely blind to the truth. Because she didn't realize she was lying against a man who had already left her in every way but physically. The cruelest part wasn't what I was going to do. It was that she never saw it coming. Because arrogance blinds people. And Julia was about to find out just how wrong she'd been. The morning I left was deliberately ordinary. Julia was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in. "You're up early," she said. I smiled faintly. "Big day." She smirked. "What would you do without me reminding you of everything?" I kissed her cheek, calm and steady. "Guess we'll never know." She laughed, not realizing it was the last joke she'd ever make at my expense. When she left for work, she didn't bother saying goodbye. She never did. She assumed I'd always be there when she got back. And that was her mistake. The second the door closed, I moved quickly. The duffel bag was already packed. The apartment was ready. Every detail of my life was now mine alone. I walked through the house one last time. The living room where she'd told me I couldn't survive without her. The bedroom where she mocked me for being lucky to have her. The kitchen where she laughed and said I'd be nothing without her. I left the letter on the counter, my key placed on top of it. Then I walked out. By noon, the texts began. "Hey, did you take my charger?" Then, "Where are you?" Then, "Why aren't you answering?" By evening, they turned sharper. "This isn't funny. Answer me." Then, "You wouldn't actually walk out." "You can't. You'd be nothing without me." But silence was the only reply she got. The next morning, she must have found the letter. Because that night, there was pounding on the door of my new apartment. When I opened it, Julia stood there, hair messy, makeup streaked, clutching the envelope with trembling hands. "You're serious," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You actually left?" I met her eyes calmly. "Yes." Tears welled up. You can't. You'd fall apart without me." I shook my head. "No, Julia. I only became stronger because of you. Every word you used to tear me down built me into someone you can't control anymore." She shook her head violently. "You're lying. You need me." I stepped back, my voice low and final. "That's the mistake you made. Believing I never could live without you. Believing I'd never leave. But I already have." And I closed the door. That was the last time I saw her face. She tried for weeks after calls, texts, even showing up at places she thought I'd be. But silence was the only answer I gave her. Because silence doesn't need an explanation. And in that silence, Julia finally learned the truth. I wasn't nothing without her. I was everything she never thought I could be without her.